Hi there, BookTube. It's Roz, and I'm here with a slightly different reading event announcement. Because in 2025, I'm hosting with Katja of Paige Turners with Katja a year-long read-along of global fiction, or predominantly contemporary global fiction, and we're calling it Reading the Globe. And we'd love you to join us for all or part of this event. Now, you may know, if you've been subscribing to this channel for some time, that the reason my channel is called Scallydandling About the Books is because when I started it, one of the things I particularly wanted to share was my enthusiasm and enjoyment of and appreciation of books from around the world, books from places other than the UK where I live, and books often originally written in languages other than English. And so this is right up my street in terms of a reading read-along. And for me, it's particularly lovely because it starts in January 2025, and that's when I reach my 5-year anniversary on BookTube. So there will be 12 books over the course of the year, so one every month. They are all fiction bar one, which is more of sort of memoir, travel writing. They're all in translation, bar one, but I'll explain that one when I get to it. They're from around the world. I think we've got books from Europe, Africa, North and South America, and Asia. Nothing from Australia or Oceania, but you can't get everywhere in one year, and I think we've made an exciting selection. There's going to be a Discord group that you can be part of to talk about the groups, and Katja and I will have something on our channels every month relating to that month's book, a live event or a single book review, or maybe I might do something about sort of other books, but by authors from that country, or a variety. So, as I say, you could join us for all 12, or just one or two. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go through all 12 of the books, so you can, if you're remotely interested, you can listen to that and get a flavour and think, oh yeah, I fancy that, or I fancy just this. So, where to start? January, of course. So in January, we're going to read Kiln by Alia, Trabucco, Zerán. Chilean author. It was translated by Sophie Hughes, such a good translator. There's some good translators in here. So it came out in Spanish in 2022, and the English translation came out this year, 2024. And it's about class and domestic work, but it's got a bit of a thriller feel to it. It begins, the setup is that there's a maid and she's locked in a room, and we're going to hear why from her, hear her story. So comes highly recommended, that one. In February, we're reading Beyond the Door of No Return by the French-Senegalese author David Diop, or David I suppose is his French. So that that was published in French in 2021, but the translation by Sam Taylor came out in 2023. And if you think, oh, have I heard of David Diop? It's probably because of his book, At Night All Blood is Black, which was a highly regarded book a couple of years ago. I loved it, I have to say. Diop was born in France but grew up in Senegal and has sort of gone between the two throughout his life. And that's in a way very much the theme of this book, but in a different way, because it is historical fiction. It's based around the life of, or inspired by the life of, a French botanist who went to Senegal at the latter part of the 18th century and to sort of study things, but obviously has the experience of being from the sort of colonizing people in, as I say, what's now Senegal, and his responses to that, and his interactions with people. And it also kind of draws on sort of Senegalese oral traditions. Yeah, interesting book. In March, well, what have we got in March? We've got a book by, of course, our new Nobel Prize winner for literature, Han Kang. How could we not fit that into our year? And it's We Do Not Part, which came out in Korean in 2021, but the English translation is published in February 2025. So it'll be hot off the press when we read it in March. It's being translated by E.Yaewon and Paige Alia Morris. So not yet sort of reviewed, but if it's by Han Kang, we know it's going to be good. We know it's going to be interesting and a bit different. The story apparently involves a friendship in present day Korea, but that causes the protagonist to sort of think back to and find out about troubled events from Korea's sort of mid 20th century history. So sort of bit of dual narrative, I think. In April, we're reading not a novel, but a collection of short stories, which will make a nice change, won't it? And that's A Sunny Place for Shady People. Sounds good. It's by the Argentine author Mariana Enriquez. It was translated by Megan McDowell, another good translator. It came out in Spanish at the beginning of this year, and then the English translation was late 2024. So, and the short stories, they're kind of gothic horror in feel, but with a distinctive sort of South American twist. And I honestly think some of the most exciting literature coming out at the moment is from South America, and she's a South American author I haven't read, as I say, from Argentina. In May, we've got our book that's a bit of an outlier, and I will explain why. So this is Two Trees Make a Forest, on memory, migration, and Taiwan, and it was published in 2020. It's by Jessica Lee. Now, Jessica Lee is Canadian. Her mother was Taiwanese and her father was Welsh. So I think kind of questions of sort of identity are going to inevitably come up in this book. So it's not translated. She wrote it in English. It's a combination, as I understand it, of kind of like family history memoir with travel writing and nature writing. And May, of course, is Springathon, so it's a book that's going to kind of fit with that, which is nice. It's I think a key thing that she sort of reflects on in this book is how landscape and the sort of environmental context affects people, and specifically affected her family's lives in the past. Yeah. So, kind of migration and so on comes into it too. That's May. June, we're reading The Third Love by Hiromi Kawakami. So that was translated from the Japanese by Ted Goossen in 2024. The original Japanese book came out in 2020. And this one, Japanese fiction is so interesting. There's something kind of always interestingly different about it. I think for me as an English reader, this one is about a young woman who's unhappily married, sort of dissatisfied, and she meets someone who makes her realise that in her dreams she can travel back in time, and she travels back to different periods in Japanese history and kind of experiences how sort of relationships and love and sex worked then, and that kind of helps change her perspective. I'm much intrigued by it, I have to say. So, halfway through the year, and are you tempted yet by any of these? I hope you are. July, we're reading Standing Heavy by the Ivorian writer GauZ, or GauZ. Not sure which way you pronounce it, actually. That's his nom de plume. It was translated from the French by Frank Wynne. It was published in French in 2014, but the translation came out in 2022, and I think it was on the shortlist for the International Book of that year. It's a short book, darkly funny, kind of takes a satirical look at the lives of migrants from the Côte d'Ivoire in France, and so it's looking at colonialism, but it goes from the 1960s up to the present day, so you kind of get a sequence of people's stories. One of the connecting factor is about being a security guard, so you're sort of seeing things through the eyes of a security guard. So I think there's a little kind of colonialism, but also capitalism sort of getting critiqued in a way, but in a funny way, and in a really kind of like short book. Now, it's probably lucky that the July book is short, because the August book is a bit of a whopper. It's a long book, this one. It's Old Kiln by the Chinese author Jia Pingwa, translated by Christopher Payne, James Trapp, and Olivia Milburn. And the original was published in China in 2011, but the translation into English is coming out in May 2025. So, when we read it in August, it'll be quite fresh. And Jia is a huge author in China, one of the sort of most respected current Chinese authors. And at times their books have been sort of banned, but they're now sort of more, respected, I suppose, by both readers and, allowed to publish. This one is set in a remote village, and the date is 1966. What does that say to you? Oh, yes, the beginning of the Cultural Revolution, and, which had a devastating impact in China, didn't it? And what's particularly intriguing about the book, apart from its sort of epic sort of scale and detail, is that it combines kind of realism with then something a bit fantastical, but all in one book. So let's hope that August gives us a bit of extra reading time to take on a longer book. In September, we're reading another book that will be kind of relatively freshly published in English. That's The Director by the German-Austrian author Daniel Kehlmann, translated by Ross Benjamin. It came out in 2023 in German, but the English translation, is being published in May 2025. But both Katja and I loved his last book to be published in English, which was Till, which was about this extraordinary figure in the 30 Years' War. Do read it if you haven't. But so we were eager to read his next one. Now, this one is, again, kind of set in the past, but not the distant past. This is set in and around World War II, and it's inspired by the life of Georg Pabst, the film director. And at the start of the First World War, he had been living in America, trying to make it in Hollywood, but he was back on a visit to Austria, sick mother, I think, and got kind of trapped basically by the start of World War II, and is pressured by Goebbels to continue to make films kind of in support of the Nazis, in effect, as part of the propaganda machine. So it's going to be, it's a book about moral and artistic dilemmas, I think we'll say. In October, something completely different, we're reading Ido's Souls by Stella Gaitano, translated by Sawad Hussain. Now, this was published in Arabic in 2018. The translation came out in 2023. And it's a novel that's epic in scope, but it's relatively short. So we can catch up with ourselves after a long one in August. Now, it is apparently the first novel from South Sudan to be translated into English. Now, this is interesting because actually the official language in South Sudan is English. I mean, there are lots of languages spoken in South Sudan, but they chose English as the sort of state language, the official language. But Stella Gaitano grew up when, before Sudan and South Sudan were partitioned, and was actually living in Khartoum, and sort of also spoke and used Arabic. And she's chosen to write this book, which is about the Sudanese civil war, in Arabic, which is one of her languages, because she also wanted people in Sudan to read it, because she would like the two former parts of Sudan to have a better understanding of each other, perhaps. We know it's an area that's facing extraordinary difficulties currently, and so it's a book about civil war. It's a book about motherhood. It's a book about migration. On to November, and in November we're reading a book from Thailand, The Understory by Sane Sangsuk, translated by Mew Propoksakul. Now, Sane Sangsuk is an extremely popular, very well-loved author in Thailand. And this book was published there in 2003, but their work's only more latterly getting translated into English, and this one was translated in 2024. And it has an elderly protagonist, which I always like in a book. When you get the central character is a monk, and he's 93, and he's a teller of tales. And it as a book, it's full of stories that kind of hark back to a lost way of life, and a time when people in Thailand sort of lived closer to the jungle, perhaps closer to nature, and it's sort of a bit fantastic, a bit folkloric, but kind of retold to children in the present day. It's not a children's book. It's but the stories are being told to children. That's November. And then we get to our last book of the year. And our last book of the year is by an author that you is probably the most well-known of all the 12 that we're reading in the year. And that's the Chilean-American author Isabel Allende. And it's her book, The Wind Knows My Name, which was translated from Spanish by Frances Riddle. Again, brilliant translator there. Came out in 2023 in both languages. It's a dual narrative. And it's a book about displaced children. And one of those displaced children is in 1938, Jewish boy leaving on the Kindertransport. And the other child is a girl in the present day from El Salvador who comes to America, and what happens to her. And it's obviously a topic that Allende feels quite passionate about, but you're in a safe pair of hands with her as an author. She's got a depth of experience in telling tales and writing novels. So that's our 12 books. I really hope that some of you will want to join us. The link to the Discord channel will be in the show notes. If you've never used Discord before, you can download it for free onto a phone or a laptop or whatever. It's it initially looks a bit odd, and then once you start using it, you realize it's really easy to use. And it's actually, I find, the most successful place to have kind of lots of threads of conversation and where you can share things and respond to each other and keep going over time. Sort of, better for that sort of thing, a bigger group than Voxer, say. So that's why we're using that. And I'd also say, look at Katja's channel, obviously to see her announcement, her take on these 12 books, but also she's got she's got a couple of other Reading the Globe kind of plans for the year, which you'll find out more about if you go to her, and she will be gradually sort of announcing in the next few weeks. So roll on 2025 and Reading the Globe.